Same detective, different design. Here's your look at McFarlane Toys, DC Multiverse, the Todd McFarlane Batman. In the 1980s, Todd McFarlane began drawing Batman professionally, working on the classic storyline Batman Year 2 in Detective Comics and creating iconic artwork including his dynamic cover for Batman 423. Todd went on to become a titan in the comic book industry, but has always had an affinity for Batman, stating, "Batman has always been my favorite character. I've always liked the fact that Batman has no superpowers when it comes down to it. He's just a dude in a costume. Conceivably, if Batman were in a huge battle in space, without any of his gadgets and tech, he could potentially die, unlike Superman." Now, I have to be honest with you guys. The Todd McFarlane designed Batman was a figure I sat on picking up for a while. Not really sure if I wanted to pull the trigger on it because I honestly didn't know if it was a figure I really wanted in my collection. Sure enough, as Lady Luck would have it, I found this guy online along with the Suicide Squad figures I've just recently picked up, and I thought to myself, maybe now is the better time to pick this figure up, and I don't know, maybe he'll look a little bit better in hand. It's not really the best way to start a review. Why don't we start this review on a better note here? We're going to move the figure over for some size comparisons. We can bring in another Todd McFarlane figure. Not the one that he's designed specifically, but I guess his team would have been responsible for translating the Dark Knight's death metal Batman to an actual figure. They're roughly going to be about the same height with one another, except for the Batman designed by Todd McFarlane has much more notably longer ears than the Dark Knight death metal Batman to his right. Some common things to come included with this Batman if you have been collecting the DC Multiverse line, and things not so common that you would expect to come with the Cape Crusader. We'll start first with the common things. He comes included with a trading card. A little harder to pick that up here. And as you can see, illustrated here on the front is what Todd's idea of what Batman should look like. Love it or hate it, I will say at least it's different. And I also appreciate the fact that they're actually using an image on the front rather than a figure, not a picture of the figure. Down below it says Batman designed by Todd McFarlane, and flip it around onto the back. The source is Todd McFarlane original design from 2020. His real name still is Bruce Wayne. His height is still 6'2". His weight is a very lean 210 pounds. I will be adding this along with all my other trading cards beginning from the DC Multiverse. Even the ones where it's figure photography, I still hold on to those. I just don't enjoy them as much. But I'll be putting this in my trading card sheets. Something I won't be putting in the trading card sheet, but still coming included with Batman, you get yourself the display stand. Hey, yes, black circular display stand. Nothing different here brought to the table. It still has the DC logo down below, and it still has that singular peg at the top hand corner. This can attach to the bottom of either one of Batman's feet. More on that in a second. And then we'll sort of cover off the things that are a bit strange on Batman. I guess it's not really necessarily this thing. It's a Batarang. Batman's known for having Batarangs. Maybe not a Batarang that looks like this, however. It kind of looks like a bat that's lost its head. At least the bat logo that's lost its head. It's molded here in gold plastic, and once again being very thick of a molded plastic. Not sure, again, why these Batarangs always have to be super thick. We have gotten Batarangs before from other companies where they tend to be a little thinner, about half the thickness. And yet the ones for the DC Multiverse, the ones that McFarlane's team are producing, they always tend to be really super thick. They do fit into his hand. It fits into his hand. But you sort of have to fight to get it in there. If I show you the hand of what it looks like, and I show you the tip of the Batarang, you can see very little of it actually sits inside of his hand. If anything, I would have made these a lot longer so that more of it would be able to fit into his grip. Because like I said, he just doesn't have the means to hold it properly. The other thing you can do, of course, is take the Batarang and wedge it. You kind of have to pry the fingers away from the palm and kind of get it wedged in between. While doing it, though, let's hope you don't draw too much blood because, boy oh boy, there's all these spikes. You can see already how it stuck itself into the skin. All these little spikes sticking out from his gloves and his gauntlets. Very prickly Batman to have to deal with. But I guess you could hold the Batarang this way as well. And it looks more like a blade than it does an actual thing he's going to be throwing. The other accessories he comes included with, let's go ahead and get that out of his hand. He comes with a couple of these swords. I say a couple of the swords. So far I haven't even shown what they look like. He's got these very, very aggressive looking bladed swords. And even like the actual guard of the hilt has spikes sticking out from them as well. They're interesting enough swords, I guess, if you want to have Batman displayed with them. I don't know if you would even call them swords, or would you just call them like knives or blades? Either way, though, you can't fit them into his hand. Working the same way as what we did with the Batarang, just pry the fingers slightly away from the palm, and then again, just get the hilt in there. A little harder because you have, like, the thumb. The thumb just gets in the way of everything. It's like, get out of the way, thumb, already. Why are you here? And then the whole time you're doing it, you keep pricking yourself. I will say, though, one comment, if I can not necessarily pick apart the figure, but one comment I would already say is, like, his thumb is way too long. I mean, he can hold the knives in his hand, but I feel like the thumbs are way too long. Maybe it's just me. It possibly could easily just be me. Of course, the other thing you can do as well, get these out of his hands already. You flip the figure around, and just by where his cape is, he actually has a little holster, a slot where you can actually slide these down. These sheaths aren't so much sheaths necessarily as they are just little tiny holsters. I would have actually even had them further down here. If you have them too high up like this, one of the problems you can already see that's facing Batman here, if you put the blades down, they go right up by his head. That can't be comfortable. I know what you're probably thinking, well, can't you just put them down a little bit further? You can get to them about here. And then anything after that, it sort of really seems like they stop dead in their tracks. So that's about the closest I've been able to get them in there. I mean, you might be able to even fight them further down, but I don't want to get them stuck in there either. And, I mean, it just looks like he's got these swords way too close to his head. They probably should have lowered them a little bit further, or even just spread them apart, so that when you're looking at the figure on this side, the handles would have been here and here, not here, so close to his face. Let's go ahead and take those out. After all that, put those to the side. And let's get a closer look at the Todd McFarlane designed Batman. Now for me, I was really on the fence of whether I wanted to pick up this figure or not. I appreciate the fact that when it came to the designing of Todd McFarlane's Batman here, they did think outside the box, or outside the bat, as you will. There are things that are similar enough to a regular traditional Batman costume, and of course there are things that are drastically changed. We'll start first with a fairly familiar looking Batman face. The front of the face kind of reminds me of the new Batman movie design, although he's got much shorter ears, but sort of like this design of cowl very, very much reminds me of the new Batman design that we're getting. Now, I have one problem with his lower mouth. This area right here, I'm drawing everyone's attention to. It looks really pasty. And I really didn't like the head sculpt initially. I will say, though, it's one of those cases where I find the head sculpt works a little bit better when you see it from the side. He doesn't look as old, necessarily. He looks a little more wrinkly when you see him from the front, and I think a lot of the culprit could be really the paint. It comes across really muddy the way they've applied it, and almost even too dark. I would have made it a lot lighter than what they actually did. It's not a great head sculpt from the front, but I will say it looks a lot better when you're seeing it from the side. I mean, when you're looking at it like that, that's traditional looking Batman for me, at least. It looks pretty clean. It looks like a decent head sculpt for Batman until you start spinning it around. And I find it loses a lot of the charm that it has when you're seeing it from the side. Again, when you see it from this side, not a bad looking Batman, right? It's one of those cases where I think if I'm going to be displaying the figure on a shelf, I'm probably going to be displaying it, turning the head slightly to the side. Because I think that's really where you get the good element of what the head sculpt maybe should have been. Or maybe when Todd McFarlane was designing this Batman figure, he designed it with the look of it from the side. That unfortunately they had to translate it still to a three-dimensional figure. It might even just be the mouth. The mouth looks just like a banana. A very skinny, long, straight banana. Again, doesn't look so bad from the side, does it? Then when you get to the rest of his body, now this is just a lot of things thrown to the wall to see if they would stick. He's got blades. He's got pockets. He's got all the things that really a 90s designed Batman, if it was designed by the folks over at, say, Image Comics. Rob Liefeld, I feel, would have a real blast of a time designing Batman, although you wouldn't really be able to see his lower legs. That's usually a running gag when it comes to Liefeld's work. But there would be pockets everywhere, and I certainly will say Batman's got pockets everywhere. The thing that you would normally have expected to see, like a belt buckle, gets hidden by the fact that they put front pockets. Now, I don't want to start breaking down the realism of Batman with a utility belt like this, because of course we're already talking about Batman. How realistic could that be? But I'm just kind of thinking to myself, if I'm Batman and I'm sitting down in a chair, or even the seat of the Batmobile, would these front pockets not be digging into areas where I wouldn't want front pockets to be digging into? If you catch my drift? It's really strange to see front pockets on the front of a utility belt. You normally expect to see them from the side. You know, the side of where you're not going to have pockets digging into areas where you don't want pockets digging into. He's got these little tiny batarangs. And I can't imagine that they're supposed to be scaled the same size as this batarang right here. This clearly looks more like it's supposed to be a bladed, like little close on contact a weapon that Batman's supposed to wield. Maybe these are more his traditional looking batarangs on the side, but good luck for Batman actually being able to grab those in the middle of a battle. Batman's trying to reach around all these large pockets on his utility belt, trying to grab these little tiny batarangs. Batman could always go the route of pulling these blades. The blades, unfortunately, just by the fact that they're so close to his body, are automatically bent. And again, I don't want to talk about the realism of Batman here, but if he's sitting down in a chair, Batman's going to be piercing his thigh every single time he sits. The knife should have been over here, but anyways. It does have good coloring, I'll give it that. It's just strange. It's sort of just a modge podge of different things thrown against the wall, and I don't know. The end result is a very busy. It's not even busy from the back either, although he's sculpted quite the bat behind. Batman's got grenades. Batman's got like little torches here. He's got everything but the kitchen sink. Oh wait, Batman has a kitchen. No, he doesn't have a kitchen sink over there. But he's got lots of little pockets, what looks to almost be like little tiny knives, possibly pepper sprays. Batman definitely has everything he needs to battle crime and then some. Now, while I was going down here, I completely avoided, again, one of the bigger problems I have with this figure is this top shoulder area. I guess from Todd's design, he wants to have a very large bat emblem, and it certainly is that. It's an emblem that goes from one shoulder to the other shoulder. It's a little too much of a bat, if you ask me. I would have made that a lot smaller. But, you know, it's difficult for me to look at a figure like this because I'm critiquing on what I consider Batman's design to be. And the whole idea of a character like this is that we're looking on a figure based on another person's design. Your design of Batman isn't going to be the same design as my design of Batman if I had the choice to design a Batman costume. So I have to respect the fact that McFarlane Toys wanted to go with a Batman costume that looks like this. It's not really my cup of tea, but it may have been his cup of tea, and I certainly have to respect that. I don't really care for how far the cape stretches and the fact that the emblem is attached to the front of the cape. But again, that's the design he decided to go with. I do like the points. The points are a nice little touch on the tops of his cape. And as you can also see as well, when it comes to his cape, he's got it in such a way that it looks like it's been folded over on both sides. It's not a wide fanned out cape. These are separate pieces technically, so they're not necessarily molded to the rest of the cape. But you can't also fold them out either. They're really supposed to be folded in like this. Batman's cape sort of forms a very, very stark point at the bottom, and it runs almost the length of the Batman's figure. It goes about right here. It's very softer plastic as well. So again, you can bend it and move it, and you can also see, draw your attention that Batman's behind once again. Very spiky gauntlets there. We've already talked about these. These will be quite problematic when it comes to moving the figure's articulation because you're going to have to put pressure against this. It's probably best advised to grab it from the sides to move his elbows because getting in there, it's hard to the skin. There are a few little gauntlets as well that were bent and warped in the plastic. So I'm going to have to heat those up, I think, and just bend those back into place. But apparently a lot of spikes. Todd likes his Batman with a lot of spikes on his body, a lot of ridiculous things on the utility belt, and things that just aren't practical when it comes to Batman actually trying to sit down. The sculpting is a pretty good look on the figure. Like there really isn't a lot of paint. There's just basically the molded gray plastic, the blue molded plastic. There is very little paint happening on the figure, so as a result of it, the paint still remains pretty clean overall on him. I'm just not sure if this is a character, a Batman figure I really like. I, once again, appreciate the fact it's different. It certainly is different. And it's, again, one of those cases where I feel like the best look of Batman is honestly looking at from the side, and not so much from the front. Let's run through the articulation on Todd McFarlane's Batman. Now, I will say, whatever my feelings may be about the head sculpt, at least it does have quite the range when it comes to being able to move. A lot of it can be contributed to the fact, if you look at the bottom of the head, there's a gap right there between the neck and the back of the chin, or the back of the inside of the chin. Because of that, you can move Batman's head quite a bit down for that brooding look. You can bring his head up for quite the high reach, and you can also rock it back and forth as well. Again, like looking at the head sculpt, certain angles work really well. Straight on is where I feel it looks the ugliest. But when you see it from the side, it's not really that bad of a head sculpt at all, really. I know I spent so much time talking about his head. Let's talk a little bit about his arms instead. Because of the way they've cut the cape, they've got it further up here. It means it doesn't restrict the arms when you want to bring them out. So as a result of it, this Batman can bring his arms out at a very comfortable 90 degrees. Batman does also have still the socket joints, but they're a little further into the body, so you don't see them as much. And I don't feel it necessarily brings much more to the table when it comes to bringing the arms around. You can only see that just a little bit of that socket joint starts working when you want to bring Batman's arms forward. He does have a bicep swivel. He does have a double hinge on the elbow, so you can do that. There is no articulation on the gauntlet, as prickly and pointy as it may be, but there certainly is when it comes to the hands. You can rotate the hands all the way around, hinging them also back and forth too. Batman does have an upper torso ball joint. Batman also has a lower torso ball joint. And even though it's not even really necessarily it's a mid-torso joint, because actually his waist would be right here. But they've made this further cut just so he wouldn't have to rub against all of this right here, even though technically, when you get to his legs are going to be running against these blades every single time. Imagine Batman would probably have to come home every single night and change the pants, because he's probably got a cut that keeps happening right here, because he's got his legs way too close to these blades. These bend like this, sure, on the figure, but in real life, these blades would be metal, and they'd be sticking in his thighs every single time. He has a swivel at the top of the thigh. Batman has a double hinge on the knee. He has no articulation in the tops of his boots. They seem to be molded to the leg area. And then when it comes to his foot articulation, because they've allotted for enough space right here, Batman can move his feet up, down, back and forth. And he does also have toe articulation as well. Fancy that, toe articulation on Batman. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. Still, after all this time, the whole reason why I passed on this figure the first go around, because I'm sure if you look online, many people have already looked at this guy months and months and months ago. I decided, yes, to sit on picking him up just a little bit longer. Is this really a figure I wanted to have in my collection? At the end of the day, he's a busy-looking Batman. He's a differently designed Batman, but there is a little bit of charm going for Batman. Oh, wait. There we go. Like I said, there's a little bit of charm going for this Batman. It's not a design I would have personally gone with when designing the Caped Crusader, but I appreciate that Todd McFarlane wanted to take a stab at things. It's not one of my favorites, but in some ways I am glad that I still picked him up. I could put him on display with the rest of the Batmans and sort of just always be as a reminder. That's apparently what. Oh, he's even taking a nap. But that's apparently what Todd McFarlane wanted to design when it comes to his version of the Caped Crusader, and I have to respect that. It's not something I have to necessarily like, and maybe some people may have passed on this figure simply just because they don't like the design of him, but I appreciate the fact that at least his idea of what the Caped Crusader should look like was translated to plastic, and I can't fault him for that. I guess in a way it kind of worked in my favor that I didn't pick up the Todd McFarlane designed Batman yet, because when I eventually decided to pull the trigger and pick this figure up, he was dropped down in price. So instead of paying the, I don't know, $30 to $35 one would normally, or I would normally have paid for a DC Multiverse figure online, I think this guy was like $14, $15. For $14 or $15, I don't mind taking the leap to see if this is actually a figure that's a little bit better in hand than he was online. Because I got to say, seeing the figure online in images and other reviews, I really wasn't sold on it, but for $15, I could take the risk. And I will say in hand, with being able to move the head around and seeing it from different angles, because sometimes you're only going to be seeing it from the front online, from different angles, this Batman works. At least his head sculpt does. Not overlooking the fact that there's something really ugly going on with his lower mouth, and it could have, a lot of it could really be contributed to the way it was painted. It's very cakey, very pasty, and his lips are super dark. When you see it really front forward like that, I find it looks more noticeable. When you see it from the side, it actually has a nice looking somebody says you have a nice profile. Who actually says you have a nice, well, some people may say you have a nice profile. I would say Batman's face has a nice side profile. It's not as much from the front, but when you see it from the side, it's not bad actually. And I find like this head sculpt reminds me a lot of the new Batman design, that Robert Pattinson. Who's the guy that's playing Batman now? I keep wanting to have Ben Affleck come back as Batman, but the new guy who's playing Batman, I find like the cowl very much reminds me of the Todd McFarlane design, or vice versa. Of course, that's just his head. The rest of his body, it's like throwing spaghetti on the wall. Well, we'll throw in this type of cape. We'll throw in swords. We'll throw in knives and mace and all the other things to his utility belt. I don't even know how this Batman could really sit in a Batmobile. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he takes a bat. Well, I guess he'd have to sit at some point. Even if he has to just sit, he's tired from battling crime. At some point, the Cape Crusader, I'm guessing, has to sit down. Maybe he just takes off his utility belt first. After you've had a full meal, you go to a buffet and you get home and you just undo the pants a little bit and you go, oh, that's so much better. Maybe Batman does that a lot of times. Whenever he sits down, he has to basically take off his utility belt. It's for show and purpose than it is for actual comfort. It's a busy looking utility belt. What do you guys think of the Todd McFarlane design of Batman? Let me know down below in the comments section. Yes, I know I'm a little behind on schedule reviewing this guy, but as I hopefully said in this review, this was a figure I really wasn't sure I wanted to pick up. Now in hand, I like him just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. If you guys are new to this channel, enjoying all the content you're seeing, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Be sure as well to turn the bell notification on, and make sure, yes, you're coming back to this channel because we will be looking at more DC Multiverse reviews from the folks over at McFarlane Toys. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.